Hi, my name's John Costa. Welcome to the Documentary Media Centre, and we're running a newsroom around COVID-19 and higher education and a few things like that, and I'm co-hosting it today with my colleague, Paul Reilly. How are you doing, Paul? You okay?
Hi, John. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And also, Paul's invited along a friend and a colleague, Dawne Irving-Bell. Absolutely delighted to see you, Dawne. Thank you for joining us today.
Lovely. Thank you for inviting me, John, and hi, Paul. So yeah, I'm Dawne Irving-Bell. I'm a Senior Learning and Teaching Fellow at Edgehill University, and I work in a Centre for Learning and Teaching.
Excellent, which I should imagine encompasses so many different things these days, doesn't it?
It does. We look after the UKPS, F for Advanced HE, for our own scheme internally. We look after the PG Cert for staff, to gain that qualification for teaching and learning in higher education. My own particular role is projects lead. So if there's anything around the institution that needs a particular looking at focus, so not long ago I was looking at the experience of students on our joint and combined honours programmes. I look after personal tutoring, induction and transitions, and one of the things that I do look after is citations of good practice that emerge from validations and periodic reviews, which is a piece of my work that we've developed slightly to something that we'll be talking about in a short while.
Well, I'm absolutely delighted, and as I'm sure Paul is as well, to be working with an expert like yourself, because what you've just done is you've beautifully surmised what exactly is what you do, and then finished on the bit what we're going to talk about, which is fantastic. I mean, you could do the job for us. We're not needed now. It's nice, is it? So let's talk a little bit about the NTR then, the National Teaching Repository. Is that where your initial idea or thought process was influenced through working with that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so I've always been obviously passionate about learning and teaching, and research is great, people publish in journals and that's super, but I know an awful lot of colleagues who do fantastic work in learning and teaching, and it isn't recognised in the same way, that scholarship of learning and teaching. So in my day job, I had the opportunity to find lots of citations of good practice, and we had an issue at my university. We were trying to get other people to take those ideas on board in their own faculties and departments, but working within silos, sometimes the ideas weren't replicable or transferable. And some colleagues in, say, the Faculty of Education would be like, well, something from the Faculty of Arts and Science may not work, the subject discipline, that kind of thing. So at my university, I was engaged in working through a scheme that we took those citations of best practice, we looked at them, we tried to identify which ones were worthy of trying to make them work in other parts of the university. We piloted it in areas where it was needed. And then once that was proven to be a strategy that, could be implemented across the university, that's exactly what we did. So working from that, we tried to disseminate the best practice, if you want to call it that, to the university. And we found that a lot of colleagues couldn't get to the staff development events and the workshops. So I set up an internal blog for my institution, whereby colleagues could go to that blog, find some good practice, either attend a workshop. There were handouts and worksheets and resources in that small space. They could contact the member of staff directly if they wanted to. And over the course of about 12 months, because I'd set it up in a WordPress space, we were able to track the data. So something else that came out of it was that we found we could identify the peaks and the troughs of when staff were needing that support. So it was around validation time, or a periodic review, or a QAA benchmarking thing, or something. Maybe they were getting Ofsted in, or they had to go through some qualification, they need some validation for an external award of qualification. So that was working really well. Another thing that we found happened was the colleagues who'd uploaded and who were sharing this information were actually starting to gain some evidence and traction of the impact of their work. They were able to use it and talk about it in performance review. They were able to use it for senior fellowship of the HEA, and those kind of things. And we're gaining promotions, and that's not a good thing really sometimes, that they leave the institution, but it is. So I took that work and shared it and disseminated it at the Advanced HE conference at Northumbria a couple of years ago. And that went down really, really well, more than I could have ever have hoped. So I noticed Advanced HE last year had put out for these good practice grants. So I captured everything that I'd done to that point and thought, well, I'll give it a go, try it and see where we get to. So I put that in and was awarded one, which was fantastic. So the money came through earlier this year in sort of January, February time. So I was all set to try to do something with on a national level of setting up some kind of repository to echo what I'd done and I knew that worked in my own institution, but on a larger scale. And then along came COVID. So it slowed down what I was working to try to do, but at the same time, it couldn't have come at a better time in terms of getting something in place whereby people across the sector nationally can access some of the best, most innovative ideas and gain that support that then they can ultimately improve the experience of their students. So to date, we've got the National Teaching Repository set up. We launched it in August. It works on a system that anyone across the sector, it's completely open access. Anyone can upload to share their learning and teaching resources. And the beauty about the system that we're using, it enables data, reports, presentations, videos, images, infographics, any form of media that you can think of. So it doesn't have to be just a traditional, research paper. So that means then that, anybody can access that space. They can log in. It's all complete. They can just view it. They can download it. So that's wonderful. And we can track the number of interactions with each individual piece that's been uploaded. But what's the benefit of uploading? Why would you bother? It's your work. You've spent all that time on it. Well, the beauty about the system is it protects your academic and intellectual property. The system we've used enables you to link it to your ORCID ID. You can get a unique DOI for each piece. You can put it under Creative Commons license, so you can have people who will be accessing it and using it to use it, exactly as it is, or allow for them to adapt it if that's what you would like. It's really easy to search and find the information. It gives you the ability to share it, so you can put it onto Twitter, and then it links to Altmetrics. So you can get a map, physically, a geographical map of the world and see who's accessed your work and how many times it's been downloaded and how many times it's been shared. So then you've got an evidence base of actually not only feeling good about yourself because you've helped other people, but you've got an evidence base for yourself if you then want to use that data and that evidence of the impact of the great stuff that you do for promotion, for senior fellowship or principal fellowship, for professorship, whatever route you want to go down. I'm going to stop there because my dog's going to bark because the doorbell's just gone. Hang on.
We'll talk amongst ourselves.
Yeah?
We'll talk amongst ourselves.
Yeah, this is, well, it's all right. I think Dave might go. That's the beauty about working from home, isn't it?
Live radio.
Someone, it'll
be like live television.
It'll be Amazon or something like that, delivering me some pair of socks or something.
So let's give you a break then. We'll dive in and ask you some questions. Is that right?
Oh yeah, dive in and ask me some questions. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So Paul, do you want to start?
I mean, I think the big thing that sort of impressed me about the NTR when you approached me about it a few months ago was this sort of bottom up. It's almost, I mean, you mentioned earlier on, institutions love researchers, academics, teachers, people to evidence things for them. And I think what you've done is sort of created a structure which doesn't have that hierarchy built into it. I mean, do you think that's something that will obviously mean it is more accessed, more used than perhaps it would be if it's institutionally owned or owned from sort of an organizational point of view?
Yeah, I would hope so, because it's been created by those at the chalk face, and it's been populated by those colleagues who are actually teaching the students. Then, I used to work in a secondary school. That was my background. And when you were working with, when I first moved into higher education, you were training the teachers, the students will always assume that the person working closest to the students knows best. you know, not the head teacher, not the deputy head. And it's the same in higher education to some degree, you know, those who are actually working with the students, who know who are closest to it, who are the personal tutors. So if they're the ones populating the repository, they're sharing their practice. I think it's well, just the number of downloads that we've had so far has been absolutely incredible. So we only started it in August, and we've had almost 9,000 interactions, downloads, people sharing, or searching for, and the people have shared it, and people are searching for that innovative, great practice. You know, they're looking for those avenues of support, and, you know, it's clearly working. So I didn't realize it would take off in that way so quickly. And at this point in time, as you know, Paul, because you're busy yourself and John, I've not had as much time to promote the repository as I would have liked, you know, but I could see the need for it. It was almost launched in August, just a little bit before it was ready. So one thing, Paul, if it's okay, because obviously you mentioned you're supporting this. I started with just a handful of institutions. It's rapidly grown to 32 already, with people contacting me every week. The system operates whereby we've divided the repository into folders, categories. So there's one for assessment and feedback, there's one for scholarship for teaching and learning, there's one for community and well-being. Anyone can come, and it's not a closed shop. The more people who are engaged with the repository, the absolute better. Anyone can come with an idea for a folder. I have had people saying, what about equality and diversity? But I'd like those themes to run through. I think they're key. I don't think they should be in a separate folder. So, but more or less any other folders that people could come up with, that's fine. We have a number of critical friends, and they're great for saying, you know, what else we could do to improve the repository generally. But each folder has a curator. So Paul is very kindly, wonderfully volunteered with a couple of colleagues to curate a folder. We've got and the role of the curator. So when you submit something to a journal in the traditional way, a piece of academic research, a paper, you generally fear the reviewer, don't you? You get your 2 reviewers back, you get reviewer 1 who's always great, you get reviewer 2 and you think, have these guys read the same paper? No, probably not. So what we're about is trying to support people not to have that fear factor, so there's going to be no rejection of a piece of work. The curators are there to support the people uploading, to make sure that they've used the best keywords, it's accessible, because obviously we need to make sure it's compliant in terms of you know, captioning and those kind of things. We want to make sure that you know, it's sound, it's safe, it's ethically okay. Obviously, if it wasn't, we wouldn't upload it. But the curators are there as sort of caretakers of that space, but not there to reject necessarily. And the idea is, over time, that the curators can continue. You know, I don't want to lose any of them because they're absolutely wonderful, but as it grows and shapes, maybe they find new curators, they move to a mentoring role, and maybe at the end of 12 months or 18 months, we don't archive it in the way that it disappears, but we take what's in the repository at that moment in time, move it to sort of an online compendium of which the curators can each be a sort of section editor, will assign like an ISBN number to that space. And then that way, in the same way that when you're searching for references for things, sometimes you always go back to the seminal text, but sometimes it's harder to find the newer pieces. What I wouldn't want to do is people to keep going back over 2 or 3 years to look at something that happened then, and not necessarily look at the newer stuff that's been uploaded more recently because it's got fewer hits. You know, so it's capturing that and trying to and as I'm talking and speaking about it, if anyone's got any great ideas and thinking, oh, well, you need to think about this, you know, please just jump in and let me know.
I mean, I think actually, Dawn, what you and John have in common is that you've started something which is free of all the hierarchy of institutions and is democratizing that knowledge. I think that's the right word for it. I know we have open access journals, but that's not the same as this, because an open access journal is the exception, not the norm. And you're right, the process by which you go through publication is fraught with often very undue and harsh review, whereas curation is a lot more open. And yeah, critical friend would be the way I'd probably view it. And my sort of approach towards the folder that I run with Paul and Skye at Sheffield is that our approach towards this would be that we might look at how it's framed and things like that, and also the keywords used to tag it, but it wouldn't be a reject or a sort of harsh line on it. I mean, I sort of wonder whether the issue that, I mean, you're both going to have in different ways is that due to the number of people submitting stuff and the growth, is that the nuance and all the complexity that comes with, obviously, well, what do we do with this now? How do we make sure that with the DMC, archives are accessible, and with the NTR, how you do that? It's probably a good problem to have, because it means it shows a success. That's the other thing, it's reach. And without doing, I'm doing that academic thing. I'm making a statement, not asking a question. Sorry, John.
Oh, that's okay.
There is. But I quite like the idea. One of the things I quite like, though, is this idea that you're kind of empowering people who are teaching to collect metrics about themselves, which, you're right, institutions only, in my experience, and John, I'm sure at DMU you've had this too, and Dawne, I'm sure you've had it as well, they love metrics. If you want to show something that has impact, if you put views, even though a view could be you 40,000 times watching the same video, they like that. And you almost have to make the case for the work you're doing by saying, look at the reach, without perhaps, I mean, the WordPress is great for the geographical one. That's what I really like about it, is getting that sort of seeing where people are coming from is probably more important than how many. And I think that's really important too.
So, I mean, just an interesting point there, just picking up on what you've said and listening to Dawne. So thanks very much, Dawne. I totally understand it now. And I can just, the beautiful thing is what you're talking, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. When you were talking there, I can see that you can see what it's going to be like. That, I think that's really great. You know, when you talk to someone who's come up with an idea for something, and you know they've struggled and they've fought and they've put all their efforts and resources into it, and then someone explain to me where you're at, and you can just see that the explanation is so simple because you've already done what you set out to do. And I think for me, that's what's really great. And certainly I find that quite inspiring, really, sitting here in the Dot Media Centre, because I'd come at it from the point of view that as someone who's taught for the last sort of 5 years at DMU as a non-academic, a sort of industry practitioner on some very kind of practical courses like communication arts and media production, I see some of my academic colleagues really get caught up in and beat up by a system that actually from the outside looks quite brutal. And, you know, I spent a bit of time in the army, and I think that's quite a brutal system to people who actually work in, you know. Whether it's full-on bullying or it's bullying by the fact that maybe you're not quite clever enough or it's not been reviewed properly. So that you got that. And I think also as someone who does stuff with people that are out working globally with social issues at the grassroots and stuff, that a lot of this practice that goes on education, the role of an educator, maybe with a small e, which is something that doesn't happen in the classroom or a lecture theatre, doesn't get captured because it goes out and is unmeasured in the world through the fact that that young person engages in the world in that way. Now, you might be lucky enough 30 years later to be toddling down the road with your little stick, and then someone comes up and goes, "You're the best teacher I ever had, and my life changed direction." And they're lovely stories and they get awards. But for everybody else, it's very difficult beyond followers on Twitter, engagements on LinkedIn, people attending an event. They're always going to be smaller numbers than the impact that you're learning. And I always come back to that example of, they said there's so many people that have got ideas for solving all of the problems in the world, like inventors, all of whom died poor because they were either disinterested in giving it away because they wanted to own it, or they had it taken off them. And so the people we thought invented this thing weren't, you know what I mean? And I know we have that with a lot of people of colour, don't we? One of the situations that comes up all the time. So I think the idea of being acknowledged for your expertise and your creation, I think is wonderful. The fact that you're able to engage with something like NTR in a way where your academic status or does your face fit or where you went to school is not the reason why you're allowed in or your work's allowed in. It's because of what it's about and what it's trying to do. And then you choose whether you kind of give it away in a Creative Commons kind of way, or you know, you want to be referenced, or, you know, you put out a call to be work in collaboration. I think it's great. You know, it's that kind of the perfect time really with COVID-19 and people's view of Wikipedia, the mainstream media having a bit of a tough time, and you know, paywalls and stuff like that. The role of academia changing. I think it's a really interesting time for you to have started this project.
Yeah. I mean, it's for me. It's always got to remain open access. It's always got to be free. Being a teacher, I used to upload a lot of stuff to different sites, such as, like, I went to the Times educational supplement, but I know they do pay now. But there was a situation where lots of people had uploaded lots of great resources for secondary school teachers into Spaces, and then lo and behold, a few months later, you'd go back in and it was behind a paywall of a subscription. And then you could request to have your work taken out of it once you realise that's what they were going to do. But I just thought, that's not really what we're about, is it? We're about, you know, sharing and imparting knowledge to others. You know, so it always got to be free, but always, when I was trying to design it, you know, what do people get out of viewing it? What do the people get who actually spend the time uploading? And what value can we get put in place for our curators? You know, and I mean, almost you could say, well, if it got so big, you know, would you pay people? No, I don't think I would. You know, because sometimes I think you pay people to be a curator, and it changes the role of what, you know, why they're doing it. You know, that rationale for, well, why do you want to do this? You know, so.
I mean, and you're right, Dawn. I mean, I have the same view as you, is that if it's not open, it's not worth doing, because what you're effectively doing is another academic journal behind a paywall with a different title. And again, I think, again, this is probably, again, the corporatization of UK universities, as we've seen during COVID, to very bad effect. And this idea that they own the stuff, I mean, again, to a certain extent, yes, if I'm publishing something, my university title follows it. So again, that I take that as read, and again, that's fair and appropriate. But this is not something that they own as a space. And I think that's the beauty of it, is that you have something there which people are contributing to across different disciplines, roles, institutions, and are doing so as a collective effort, where during a pandemic, where suddenly everyone has to adjust to online, and a lot of senior academics, that's a big ask. They have all that information there, free, accessible. And the one thing about the NTR that Dawn's mentioned, which I think is really impressive, it's not just written report. It's not 7,000 word reports written in jargon, or this is stuff like, even I've put out a PowerPoint presentation, things which are more bite-sized. And I think that's the really good thing. I mean, I'd be interested to see the videos that come in from this.
Well,
we get in line.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we've had a couple, Natalie's uploaded a couple of softball podcasts. So one thing I should mention as well is, in fact, Simon Thompson from University of Liverpool, he's uploaded something, but what he's done is he hasn't kept it per se in the repository, because he'd like to possibly get his own metrics. So that's how it's a link from the repository to the University of Liverpool. So, you know, it's still getting their data as well. So while it sits where it sits, there's still a facility within the system that if you want it to go to your own personal website or your own institution's space, you know, to gather data in that way, that's fine. It's just an extra click, but it's still there, and it still works. But it's
that brings me nicely onto my next question about
Taskmaster here.
Yeah, at some point you'll come back to be ambushed. It's all right. You might think you got away, but you'll be brought back into be ambushed. So from a membership, you were saying, like, there's no such thing as membership and stuff like that. And you're looking to, certainly the conversation we had before we started the recording, you were saying to me about you're up for not just academics, but, you know, people that are interested in that sector as well, the broader kind of people that are interested in that area.
Yeah, so one thing I did miss out was when I was piloting the system, we've got a fantastic guy at Edge Hill University called Liam Bullingham, and he's sort of sort of called him my technical director, but he looks after Figshare at Edge Hill. And without him, I couldn't have you know, done as much work on it as I've done. And obviously he isn't an academic per se, he works in a learning support services. And there's loads of great work goes on in those professional services, student support, you know, well-being, you know. So any work that those colleagues from any part of the sector, across the sector, where they have something to share, they can upload the same. So I'm doing something with Liam on Open Access Week, so he's going to do a little push to see if we can get some, you know, the college and learning services, library services, to upload some of the great stuff that they've been doing as well. You know, it's for anybody really. It doesn't just have to be, you know, a particular. The more people who engage with it, the absolutely the better, because the richer the area will become. And if that means setting up another couple of folders, you know, I worry about getting too neat, because then you've rid of people don't particularly. If the keyword searches are there and you put COVID in and you put student support, or you put, you know, progression or induction or transitions, whatever the keyword is, it will come up the same. So you're looking at the work, not necessarily the person who's written it or generated it, and you'll find that. And if you can just take away one idea of your ability folder as well for CPD, continuing professional development, which is curated by some great colleagues. So there's loads of stuff in there that, you know, people not working directly with students are working to support staff. So even HR colleagues, you know, could put things in.
I mean, it's on that. Liam's great. Liam in Sheffield, so I mean, he was very helpful to me when I was trying the excellent. I mean, I think it's one of those things again where we often pigeon. But I mean, I was talking to a marketing person from my area and saying about, you know, your professional. I mean, John used the word issue experts, which I really like, because it means, it doesn't mean to say it needs to be Dr. So-and-so or a research fellow. You know, often the people with the best experience are those who are dealing with things day to day, which do not get any kind of platform airing or recognition. And I kind of wonder, I mean, it's sort of a difficult question to answer, Dawne. I mean, I think that do you think the recognition thing is something that you're almost providing, that where institutions that are employing staff or just don't?
And then senior fellowship of the advanced HE the same as anybody else, but sometimes it's a little bit more difficult for them to gather the evidence for that, whereas this will provide them with that space to be able to have that conversation, you know, to start that, to view their work in a different way than perhaps they've been encouraged to do before.
I wonder again, you know, the future of the NTR. I think you'll have a lot of people who will have used that in their cases for support for HEA recognition or those things too. And it'll be interesting to document that. I mean, again, that's, I hate to use the word impact, but that's what it is. And this is impact.
Yeah. I need to get Liam to put another field on for metadata. That's what I need to do. Because it'll do that. You can put extra things in, or maybe, you know, after 12 months, see, you know, get those stories, because that will bring it alive as well. You know, the stories that people, you know, have that support, you know, positive for them.
It kind of feeds. I mean, you're obviously wanting to show the pedagogical value, yes, which obviously is primary, but also there is a professional angle to this as well, and also there's a community development. I mean, do you think the community development part is the bit? Was that the bit when you were thinking of this, going back to before you applied for the money to do it? Was that paramount, or was it thinking of the pedagogical value, or was it a bit of both?
You're a bit shy when you start, aren't you? So I approached people who I sort of knew to start with, but obviously didn't know you. You know, and with COVID, I haven't physically met the majority of people who are now people who are passionate about learning, they're passionate about teaching, passionate about supporting and mentoring other people. And it just seems to have been people seem to have been drawn to it, you know, and when the word gets out, someone's just emailing me, and I have to get my email and the NCR Twitter feed and the blog and the website, you know, to make sure I'm not missing anybody who's saying, oh, how do I become involved? You know, so some people are a little bit shy. Some people think it's some great big wonderful, you know, it's a wonderful thing, but it's something that isn't accessible to them, and that couldn't be anything further from the truth. You know, anybody could become a critical friend. You know, and I've been really pleased with how many people have come forward and said, well, that's okay. And, you know, could I be a critical friend? And I said, well, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think we'll be definitely interested in becoming a critical friend of the Dot Media Centre and seeing how we could work with you as we go forward.
The only downside is that I'm running out.
You know, again, I mean, it's. Oh, sorry, John, go ahead.
No, I just said I think it'd be really nice to explore about the Dot Media Centre becoming a critical friend as well, and seeing how we can bring together some of the workings that we've got over the sort of the majority world that we can kind of bring to people's view as well. Maybe act as a bit of a conduit for that as well. But certainly interested in having a chat.
I mean, I was saying just before we started recording, I have had a couple of colleagues from abroad, international, from Australia and the States, saying, well, can I upload? Well, of course you can. And how does it become then international? Obviously, baby steps. I wanted to make sure that the infrastructure was in place first, that we had a system that would work and would be okay. So, because as you knew, Paul, for the curators, when I started, I had you've all got logins using your own personal email addresses. Well, very quickly then, and possibly, in fact, I could align this with the success of the NTR, but quite a few already, but 3 or 4 got promotions and to start new roles in September. Well, I hadn't even really got started, so then we had to change their logins, which was problematic. So I set up generic emails and logins so that we can change the curators more easily, but that's just like a little learning process for me. But certainly building it and, you know, maybe going international, other than me having to redo the logo, which being an ex-graphic designer, I can do that, you know, and just change it and tweak it. I think, you know, I think that'll be great.
Yeah,
you know?
Good. That'd be good. Well, anything we could do to help. I said, obviously, we have a researcher in residence as well, which really helps.
Excellent. Yeah. No, I'll have those chats. That'll be great. But yeah, I'll add you on.
No,
get you a login.
That's a good idea. No, definitely, John. I mean, I think there's, with John, your sort of framework of issue experts, open academics. I mean, John, when we first started collaborating a few years ago, you know, I just on a flip chart paper, John, I think I still have it in my office.
Yeah.
I'm trying to explain to students again how we were going to teach digital activism, and it's a really neat way. And I've been pressuring John for a good number of months to write it down. And John, even a PowerPoint where we could upload it and then talk about that as a model towards, you know, for education, which also complements higher education. There's definitely something in that. I mean, I kind of wonder on the internationalization front, language. I mean, thinking about obviously the stuff that we're getting is, you know, predominantly, if not exclusively, English. Do you think we might get to a point where there's an NTR which has stuff in Spanish or in different things, or is open to academics from institutions where they teach it?
I don't see why not. You know, most people have access to Google Translate, and it would really enrich the whole, you know, if you were looking at something from, you know, just that different approach with the culture and the ethos and the way, you know, again, as we were talking just before the recording started, you know, how that is. I think that would just bring a richness and a depth to it. So maybe we're ready for the next step. Maybe we should make it international. Just go for it. That's a New Year's resolution. You know.
Well, we're happy to help. I mean, if we could host a newsroom for you, where you know we can host a newsroom where we can reach out to various people or institutions and have something, you know, happy to help. That's what we do here. So it'd be great to be able to support something like that, because I think anything that's open access and encourages people to share their practice. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, they think it's good, you know, and they think it's the best, and it's their practice. I think that's it. We need to maybe own that space and take it away from institutions, and we need to put it back into people. And I guess where that we started, where we finished there, that's where Paul said it's bottom up, isn't it? So
it is, absolutely. Yeah. No, I think we'll do that. Let's do it.
Great. Well, listen, thank you very much.
You'll never know, you know.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time. Wonderful to talk to you.
Yeah, it's been brilliant. Very good.